Namaskar. What's happening in Bangladesh and also what's happening in Ukraine? These are the two topics we're going to be talking about. First, Bangladesh, some breaking events. And to talk all about this, let's have Utsav C. He's joining us now. Utsav ji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you?
Namaste and happy to be back, Sree.
Thank you so much. We've got a new format, viewers, and we would appreciate it very much if we can comment on the portrait mode that we are bringing it to you. We believe that its resolution is breathtaking. But just it's my belief. I'm always an optimist. So let us know how you feel the portrait mode pictures are. So Utsav, I'm going to come to you in just a moment about what's happening in Ukraine. But in Bangladesh in general, there has been trouble brewing for a while now. Today, Hasina made a statement that seems to have really set the cat among the pigeons, and a lot of churn going on from there. Viewers, we have some breaking news that we are trying to confirm, and I don't have it confirmed yet, but the breaking news I'll tell in just a moment. I want opening statement from Utsav on what he sees happening in Bangladesh and what he sees happening in Ukraine. Then I'll come to the main story. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Sree, for inviting me. There is a lot of churn happening in Bangladesh, and as you may be seeing in the news, there is violence on the streets. There are students that are coming out, and this was expected along the lines of what we could have predicted before, because there are two things that are very important for our audiences to understand and for people across the world to understand. The current interim regime in Bangladesh that came to power unelected last year has not done a good job. It came with a lot of promise, as always happens. It claimed to have brought a quote-unquote revolution, color revolution, if I can call it that way. But it did not deliver as expected, because everybody knew, at least people like us knew, that it didn't have anything to deliver. It was essentially a pathway for the radical Islamists to gain power. And so now what you see after a year is that people are getting upset. People are getting frustrated. The Bangladeshis are not better off now than they were 1.5 years ago or 1 year ago. All the promises that were made are not being fulfilled. Only the Islamists are getting what they want, and they are not yet. They are not happy because they're not getting everything they want. So there is people. There are people out there who are very, very unhappy. There are protests in the street because, according to the radicalization and the Islamization of the country, music teaching was banned from schools, and so students came out and started protesting. Under all these circumstances, it is easy to see that Yunus is under tremendous amount of pressure. His backers in the radical Islamist circles, especially the Jamaat-e-Islami, may be having second thoughts about backing him, and may even explore the idea of grabbing power. At the same time, Sheikh Hasina, who is the legitimately elected leader of the country still, because there was never an election that was done in Bangladesh after removing her from power, she has a voice now, and more people are realizing that what was done last year in August may not have been the best idea. And when I'm saying more and more people, it's the people of Bangladesh who are realizing. We always knew this, but on the ground, people are realizing this more.
Thank you so much. And let's talk about Russia, Ukraine for a second. And then I want to give the breaking news. I have everything loaded to go, viewers. See, there are a couple of hints that are coming now. Is the NATO getting ready to dump Zelenskyy like a hot potato? Because a couple of scandals have come. And in return, will they also dump Ursula? Over to you.
So that's a very important observation that you made. So what is happening is, and I'm going to discuss this further in my site report on the map that usually I've been doing, and you will see why this is happening. But the latest news is that there is investigation that is heating up. It was actually started a couple of months ago, but it is now beginning to heat up against the inner circle of Zelenskyy and Zelenskyy himself to some degree. But his inner circle is getting under the eye. And this is happening because of two things. NATO is not happy with Zelenskyy. NATO is not happy with his inner circles. There was always corruption in Ukraine. It's been going on since time immemorial. Since 2014, at least, there has been a good record of a lot of corruption in Ukraine. But NATO is focusing, or EU countries are focusing on it now more, because they are looking for a pathway to delegitimize Zelenskyy, because they are very unhappy with him. And I think he has He has run his course. There are other alternative leaders they are looking at, and that is why probably these issues are being brought forward. Now, there needs to be an understanding that within Ukraine, Zelensky still has a lot of support in the current ruling structure. The SBU, which is their intelligence unit, their army, a big chunk of their army, that and at least their commanders, are still loyal to Zelensky and to the SBU. And the SBU is loyal to Zelensky. So there is going to be a pushback from the power structure within Ukraine against their benefactors, which is NATO and United States. And so what you see now in terms of corruption scandal is essentially a tussle for upper hand between the existing ruling structure in Ukraine and its intelligence apparatus led by Budanov and the NATO EU structure.
Thank you so much. A small request to all of you to please like this video. I'm going to put up a X post that I have been double checking, and let's first take a look at the post. The post says that Yunus is set to leave the country tomorrow. This came a few hours ago, as the Bangladesh army prepares to take charge and restore order. There have been riots all day today following the speech of Sheikh Hasina, but that was not the first one. There were other speeches also, I think also from the BNP leaders. So there has been something going on, and the story is that army will temporarily take over. On the 20th of November, a caretaker government will be formed, and there will be a way for neutral elections to take place very, very shortly. This is basically what this particular tweet says. Now, I have been trying to confirm this, and this is where I've been waiting. What we are going to do is, I have some feelers out there, and we will know for sure. How do you know for sure? Well, last time, remember viewers, I had told you that Yunus had 2 planes waiting, one to go to Dubai, one to go to Singapore. These were spotted on the tarmac. So we're trying to see if we can get something of that indication this time also. And if we get that, then we will confirm it. But the bigger story today is what is happening in Ukraine, because Utsav has an update on that, and in our opinion, Utsav's and my opinion, this has a direct bearing on the US-India free trade agreement. And how that affects it, I'll come to that in just a moment. In fact, Utsav might touch upon it also. Let's first take a look at what is happening on the ground in Ukraine. Over to you, Utsav.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing the screen. Let me try to see how I can look at this. And this time, I'm going to try my best to move the map myself and see how we can do. Hopefully, the viewers will be satisfied. So do you guys all see the map?
Yes, yes, yes. All good.
So I'm going to start. So this is the larger conflict zone from the top to bottom. Obviously, you see the blue areas that used to be under Russian control was taken back by Ukraine in 2022. The red and the orange are areas, all these dots are areas that Russia has henceforth recaptured. This is the Kursk region where they had done a massive operation to recapture. So now I'm going to go in, zoom in, and start moving from the left corner all the way up to see where the real fighting is happening, what are the changes that are happening. And it will also tell our viewers here why the investigation against Zelensky and the corruption charges that are now being brought up, why they are happening, what's the connection between these. So what you see here is that on the ground, starting with this corner on the westernmost part, this is the Zaporizhia region, and this is where one of the largest nuclear power stations are in the 𝗥𝗘𝗙𝗿 area. This is the world's largest nuclear power station, Europe's largest nuclear power station, and which is under Russian control now. This is the Dnipro River. This used to be a dam and full of water. Now it has been emptied because of fighting, and the dam was blown up. You see that the Russians are slowly beginning to move up from this direction and take control of this area. The goal that Russians have here is that because this area cannot be transferred with heavy vehicles because it's very soggy and muddy, and in winter it will get worse, and the Ukrainians cannot move any armored or mechanized movement on this surface, the Russians are using this advantage to try to move up to Zaporizhia and do an envelopment on the left side. On the right side, they are moving very fast in this region. Just in the last 1 month, they have conquered this entire area. And this is happening because the Ukrainian defense in this area is very poor. the Ukrainians have been primarily focusing on this area in the Pokrovsk and the Kupiansk area. So the Russians are having an upper hand. They are moving very fast. These are the two defensive lines. You see the blue lines here that the Ukrainians have. And the Russians are trying to bypass those two defensive lines by moving behind them up in this area along Andriivka and Novoandriivka. So this is the area. Eventually, I think that in the next month or two, the Russians will try to move up into this area. They will try to put a siege similar to what is happening in Pokrovsk now on the city of Guliapol, which is a very powerful urban area and a strong point for the Ukrainians. And once that happens, then this area will be under tremendous pressure from the Russians. And eventually, maybe in the next year, if the war continues, this area will fall into the hands of the Russians. And if that happens, I think Ukrainians can say goodbye to this 値rgodar region and this area. It will be impossible for the Ukrainians to recover it. Now, moving into the Pokrovsk region, which is now in the news, and many of our viewers may be hearing about it in mainstream media. Last time when I spoke 2 to 3 weeks ago, I had discussed how the city of Pokrovsk was being targeted. So last time the map was more or less around this area. So in the last 3 weeks, Russia has fully taken over the city of Pokrovsk, and there is no chance for the Ukrainians to reconquer it back. In fact, about 2,000 to 3,000 Ukrainian soldiers are trapped in the area of Mirnograd, which is this area. In fact, the reason there are more soldiers trapped here is because the Ukrainians thought that the Russian attack is going to come from the east. And that's, this is the side of Donetsk. And they had much better defenses on this side, except that the Russians over the last year moved below and flanked them and went to Pokrovsk first and left Mirnograd. So now the entire Ukrainian defensive setup that was facing east has been circled from behind. Now, the silver lining here is that last time you had also seen in the map that this area was also taken by the Russians up in the north here, especially this area of Zetyask, or I'm mispronouncing it, and Sukhetsky. So this area, the Ukrainian Azov battalion, which is their special forces equivalent, which is a very, very highly motivated neo-Nazi movement, they put a tremendous amount of resources and fighting and successfully pushed back the Russians from this area. They also pushed back the Russians from this area, the Zoloty area, which the Russians had conquered when I spoke last time 3 weeks ago. So what that enabled the Ukrainians in the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd area is that they opened up this road. You see this road going north here. That road, which was previously under Russian fire control, was opened up, and a lot of Ukrainian soldiers were able to flee this area, even though now you can see that the Russians have some control over this area. So now they cannot flee anymore. But in the last 2 weeks, that was something that the Ukrainians pulled off successfully to save at least 1,000 soldiers. Moving further east, you see the Russians are already on the outskirts of Konstantinivka, which was pretty much where they were when we spoke 2 weeks ago. So not much movement in this direction. In Siversk, Russians have moved further. You see the city of Siversk. The Russians are on the edge. They are going to eventually take this city. Most likely what they will do is they will move in from the south and try to move in from Dronivka here and block the highway, and then do what they did in Pokrovsk, which is to envelop them, cut off their supplies, and take away the city. Last time when we spoke, the Russians were on the outskirts of Liman. They are still on the outskirts. In fact, I don't think there has been much movements in the last 3 weeks. So the Russians are essentially trying to bypass Liman and cut off the supply routes on the northwest and the southeast, with only this road open. And that way they will try to do to Liman what they are doing to every other city. Further north, if we go up here, we had discussed Kupiansk last time, and we had discussed how on the eastern bank of the river, there's a big Ukrainian stronghold that has been surrounded. The main city of Kupiansk has fallen to the Russians. Last time they had not cut up this highway. These two highways were still open when we spoke 3 weeks ago. So in the past 3 weeks, the Russians have taken over, cut off these highways. The center of the city is in Russian control. The river separates the two. This side of Kupiansk is now isolated. This road, this highway, which can also move trucks and mechanized vehicles, has also been cut from both sides. So the Ukrainians will have to figure out a way how to get out of this. I believe there will be probably 2,000 to 3,000 Ukrainian soldiers trapped here. Russians are also going to have to pay a price for it, because what the Ukrainians are doing is that they are trying to attack the Russians from the west, and they are trying to cut off the Russian supply lines in this area. As you can see, they have managed to cut off one road, which is Route 79. So it's a back and forth game, but as you can see, the upper hand is absolutely with the Russians. They are squeezing the Ukrainians, and the biggest challenge that the Ukrainians face now is that they do not have human resources. They're running out of soldiers. The number of deaths that the Ukrainians are having, or the number of injuries that they are having, is, in my opinion, 3 times or so more than what the Russians are having, even though the Russians are the attacking force. So it should have been the other way around. So we don't know exactly how this will pan out, but things are really, really dire for the Ukrainians. Similarly, there's a new change here. This city of Vovchansk, which the Russians actually first attacked last year, more than a year ago. And now they have taken over this city. So they are creating a buffer zone towards Kharkiv, further down here. This is the Kharkiv region. So the Russians are trying to create a buffer zone here to protect the city of Belgorod, where Ukrainians have done a lot of special operations and targeted the city. Similarly, in this area in the north near Kursk, the Russians have created a buffer zone. All in all, doesn't look good for the Ukrainians right now, which takes us back to the issue of the fight that is happening between the NATO and Americans and Zelensky, because I think EU is trying to push Zelensky to send more soldiers, recruit more soldiers, and there are no people to fight on the Ukrainian side. So it's not good.
So, interesting story that came. Angelina Jolie decides to take a visit to the war-torn area. She gets a driver. She's setting off in a car, goes to a checkpost, and this driver is 16 years old. The driver is pulled out of the car, and Ukrainians tell him, "You go join the army. We need funds."
Yeah, that is a true story. Unfortunately, that is what happened. And what is interesting here is that, see, it is these kinds of incidents that show the desperation on the side of the Ukrainians, and it doesn't look well on the side of NATO and US, because what essentially it tells the world is that no matter how many weapons you give, no matter how good those weapons are, which obviously our American weapons are really good quality, at the end of the day, where the rubber meets the road, it is manpower, infantry, and battle tactics that can make the difference. And it is becoming more and more clear that the Russians have a good amount of upper hand on that aspect.
So regime change, assuming that that's what it is headed towards, how is that going to help Ukraine, Utsav?
I don't think that the regime change is going to help Ukraine. What I believe is that Zelensky is running out of friends in the West. He obviously didn't make that many friends in the American new establishment under President Trump. He was always considered a Biden guy, somebody who was close to the Biden administration. So there are new options that the Western countries are exploring. Obviously, the previous head of the military, Zaluzhny, who is currently the ambassador of Ukraine to UK, he's in London. Zaluzhny is a very good option that the Westerners, especially the British, are looking at. He is a charismatic personality. He is far more right-wing than Zelensky. He has more support amongst the Ukrainian nationalists and what many would call neo-Nazis or Nazis. I won't say any further on that, but it's interesting to see that Zaluzhny has a lot of future. The mayor of Kyiv, Klitschenko, who used to be a MMA fighter, he is very familiar to the Western leaders because he used to live in the US and Europe a lot. He is also a potential candidate because he's somebody who is very friendly to the West. He's very familiar with the leadership in the West. He's the mayor of Kyiv. So you never know. He might be the next leader. But it doesn't look good for Ukraine on the ground. And that is something that we all have to be aware of. What it does in terms of impact on geopolitics, especially the US-India relationship, is that it sends a message to our government in Washington, D.C., that no matter how much sanctions we put on Russia, no matter how much we have tried, and trust me, we have tried to squeeze Russia on the economic front, the fact that China has stood by Russia, as much as it has, Russia has managed to deal with the impact to some degree. And this desire and expectation that the Russian economy will somehow collapse, or there will be some kind of a cataclysmic series of events that will change the direction of where Moscow is heading today, hasn't unfolded. So I think we are running out of options in the West to deal with this situation.
Thank you so much. And I still haven't gotten any update on what's happening as far as Yunus is concerned. Although some news is coming that Yunus is trying to be more like I'm going to have like a interim government, blah blah blah, something like trying to save face. But the important thing is, which way is the army chief leaning? And this is the one critical factor. Utsav, I don't know if it was on your show or somewhere else, I think India saved his, I don't want to use a three-letter word, his skin a couple of times.
See, so I don't know much. So, until I know everything in detail, I really cannot say much. But what I can say, what I feel is happening is that there is no doubt Yunus is losing power. There is, whether he's going to be leaving or I really don't know. It's impossible to know these things until they happen. But he does have a really downward trend in terms of his future, and that's not just because Sheikh Hasina and her party as well as or the army are gaining strength and gaining power within the country. That is already happening. What is the real reason why Yunus is losing power is that his own backers in the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is literally the only backers he had, he was their proxy, they themselves are not very happy with him. And they themselves see themselves as gaining power in the country in the future. So Yunus is kind of getting orphaned. I mean, the people Yunus did the coup against don't like him, obviously, and they are gaining back their popularity. And the people who supported him to do the coup also don't like him anymore. So from that perspective, he's not looking good. But I don't know the details of what's happening right now.
Utsav, so they got in through the proverbial political bullet. Now they are trying to cement it using the ballot. Let's see how this thing plays out. And this is Sheikh Hasina's announcement. Today we are still on the 13th. So tomorrow morning is where she said that we are going to have protests on the street. This is Awami, reasserting itself. Interesting days ahead for Bangladesh. And if there are any questions, there are a few questions, Utsav, for you. Maybe we can take those.
Okay.
First question, is India still buying Russian oil, please? I heard from a UK politician that the current PM is having secret links with Ukraine president. Is it true? Of course he does secret links with you.
UK has been one of the most steadfast backers of Ukraine. In fact, many people would say that it was former Prime Minister Boris Johnson who convinced Zelenskyy to continue the war under the belief that somehow it will put Russia beyond the brink. It didn't happen, but UK has been a steadfast backer of Ukraine in the European Union. It's probably the biggest backer of Ukraine at this point of time in the European Union, followed by France and Germany, and Finland and Poland. Poland is obviously a smaller player, but that's how I see it. And in terms of, is India still buying Russian oil? I believe so. I think President Trump gave a statement a couple of days ago where he said that India is buying less Russian oil. So I believe that our leadership in Washington, D.C. also acknowledges that India is still buying Russian oil, because that's, when you say somebody is doing something less, it means they're still doing it. So India is, in my opinion, buying.
I mean, my dear man, we have an update. In October 2025, India's crude oil imports from Russia was about 148 million barrels per day, or 1.48, I think, up from 1.44 million barrels per day the month before. It's gone up a little bit. According to one monthly analysis, India remained Russia's second largest buyer of fossil fuels in October 2025, with crude oil accounting for 81% of the value of its Russian fossil fuel imports. I don't understand that, but you get the idea. India is continuing to buy from Russia about the same numbers, same quantities. Next one, please. Was that the last question? Let me see. There's one more. Will Jolani recommend Nobel Peace Prize for Trump?
It's quite ironic. I saw a photograph of Jolani with Brian Mast, Congressman Brian Mast, who lost both his feet. He lost both his feet in an IED explosion while he was posted in the U.S. military in Afghanistan, when he was still in the military. So now he's a member of Congress. He's one of the most powerful members of Congress with dealing with foreign policy. Standing right next to Jolani, the irony here is that Jolani was one of the earliest Al-Qaeda operatives in Iraq when U.S. was still in Iraq, before Obama came, before during the time of President Bush, who had perfected the technology of IED and blowing up vehicles with improvised explosive devices. So Jolani is, you can say, the great grandfather of IED devices, which later the Taliban used to blow up today's Congressman Brian Mast's leg. So there was a photograph where Congressman Brian Mast and Jolani were standing next to each other, and that, I guess, is the irony of geopolitics in today's world.
Next one. A heart of war by other means. That is what is politics. Manav-san wants to know, is Russia fighting a long-term war, or could Ukraine forces collapse and roll back? Is Russia planning to grab entire Black Sea coast, including Odessa? Would that happen soon or take a long time?
See, Russia is prepared for a long-term war. That much I can tell. The reason I believe that is because in the Russia, if you were to put yourself, see, we in America, we think in global terms from American perspective, because we are in this country, we understand how the world works through the lens of America, and same for Indians who are in India. In the case of Russia, Russia carries the memories of the Cold War, and Russia dreads those memories. So Russia has worked very hard over the last 2 decades to plug in the gaps that in their analysis led to their defeat in the Cold War. And in my opinion, Russia has done a pretty good job in plugging those gaps, in removing their structural deficiencies because of which they lost the Cold War, as the Soviet Union, which they were at that time. So Russia is preparing for a long-term war, no doubt about that. Russia does want to control the tempo of the long-term war. So Russia doesn't want to cross red lines. Russia is very graduated in its approach towards this war because Russia doesn't want to let things go out of its control. It wants to fight a managed conflict that will not impact its population beyond what it can manage. So the next part of your question, could Ukrainian forces collapse and roll back? Yes, I believe Ukrainian forces can collapse, because what happens in an attrition war, the war where both sides are trying to damage each other every way possible, energy infrastructure, logistics, weapons, infantry or soldiers, they're trying to beat each other out into submission. In that kind of conflict, one of the sides usually has a breaking point. And so far it looks to me, things can change in reality. So far it looks to me that Ukrainian army will be the one that will have the cataclysmic collapse at some point. As I was showing in the map, if the city of 𝗂𝗏𝗄𝗏, which was on the first half of the conversation in Zaporizhia, this portion of the map, if the city of 𝗂𝗏𝗄𝗏 falls, then there could be a cataclysmic collapse in the Russian camp. But that needs to be seen. But you can remove the map now. We can have the conversation. Is Russia planning to grab entire Black Sea coast, including Odessa? Would that happen soon or take long? I believe the Europeans have worked very, very hard to ensure that Russia doesn't capture Odessa. I also believe that there are French and British special forces, SAS and French, International Legion, Foreign Legion, whatever they call it. There are special forces in Odessa from the European countries. They will not let Odessa fall, because the entire strategy of the Western countries, given their historical obsession with Crimea, is that they don't want the only warm water port in Ukraine to get blocked, which is the city of Odessa. And Russia feels it's equally important to grab it. So I do not see Odessa falling unless the war continues for another 2 years. But again, war is unpredictable. Nobody can predict real wars. If somebody claims they can predict, it's fluke or they're just being bombastic. So I won't claim that Odessa would fall that easy.
See, there is a reason why this is happening, viewers, because there is a small patch of land called Transnistria that is sandwiched. Yeah, that is sandwiched between Ukraine and Moldova, and I think Poland, if I remember correctly.
Correct. If you
it is separate from all this, and it is Russia controlled, isn't it?
Yeah. If you show the map again, I can show Transnistria.
Yeah.
So Transnistria is basically, are the audiences seeing the map?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is the border of Romania. This is Chisinau, which is Romanian land, and this is Ukraine. This is Odessa. So you can see that the Russians are already on the mouth of Odessa and can actually see ships, both through radar and in some cases drones. They can literally observe the port of Odessa. But this is, you see Chisinau, and you see this strip of land that I'm putting my hands over is the piece of land. This is the piece of land that is called Transnistria. And this piece of land is what is a Russian enclave between Romania and Ukraine. And initially, when the war started, Russia's goal was to take Odessa and connect with Transnistria and kind of create a larger strategic envelopment and cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea. That did not happen. And that, if we were to look at it impartially, that would be considered a strategic victory for the NATO and the US alliance, that they were able to cut off Russia from taking over Transnistria. So, that's the silver lining I can say on this issue.
All right. Next question, please. 𝗪𝗡𝗙𝗿, will India really stop buying Russia's oil? Should we buy it because it indirectly helps China, which helps Pakistan? What should be our strategy?
I don't know what India's strategy should be. I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C. I have no way to advise anybody in India on their strategy. But what I can say is that India, it seems to me, has plans to continue to buy Russian oil purely from its own perspective, own benefits. India is benefiting tremendously. It's able to keep inflation down. In fact, some states, it's deflationary economy in India. And so India has been able to control prices primarily because of its ability to have cheap Russian oil. I don't think India is going to change that. It may go up and down depending on the trade negotiations with other partners. I don't think India will stop. About indirectly helping China, which helps Pakistan, I think China has good relations with Pakistan. America has good relations with Pakistan. India is caught between the devil and the deep sea. India has to figure out its own strengths and work on its weaknesses.
Thank you so much. Next question, please. How is Russia benefiting from all this?
So, see, for Russia, it's a civilizational view on these things. Russia sees Ukraine as India would see, Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Even though Ukraine is an independent country, Russia had acknowledged that it was an independent country. Russia has accepted it as an independent country, but Russians see Ukrainians as their civilizational brethren. Ukrainian nationalists don't see it that way. They consider Russians to be less Russian than the Ukrainians themselves think of themselves as Russians. The Ukrainians think they are the real Russians. The Kievan Rus, the historical Kievan Rus was, as they say, in Kiev. Russians think that Ukraine is their backyard. It's a way of looking at things. So Russia does want to have as much of Ukraine as possible. It is true, though, that we have to accept that eastern part of Ukraine, about 60% of Ukraine, is very Russian. They speak Russian language. They consider themselves, they're culturally very Russian, despite nearly 10-15 years of efforts by Ukrainian nationalists to change that identity. They have not succeeded. So there must be enough Russian identity in Ukrainians that has led them to continue to think of themselves as Russians. So it's a complicated thing. Russia sees itself benefiting from it. Geopolitically speaking, Russia doesn't want the NATO forces to be able to position their nuclear-capable missiles any further than Poland. And Russia, this is some of the things that have been Russians claim they have been saying from the beginning that was leading to this conflict. Russia keeps saying that when the Soviet Union broke up, advisors of President Reagan and George Bush, when treaties were being signed, when the Berlin Wall came down, they had promised, and I have seen videos where it seems that they have promised that on record, that the NATO will not expand beyond Germany. And then NATO kept on expanding. It took Poland in, it took Romania in, it took many other countries in. Russians think of that as a betrayal. Russians feel that that is something that is never going to stop. Then obviously in the 90s, the Serbian-Croatian conflict happened. The Russians feel that Slavs are being targeted by, so it's a multiple set of reasons. They feel aggrieved. For them, this is a civilizational war.
Thank you so much. A lot of things that I wanted to touch upon, like nuggets of data actually. Angela Merkel, after signing the Minsk II accord, they were first Minsk I, that nobody did anything. The Ukraine didn't do its part. Then there was a Minsk II, which Putin signed, and they were supposed to have implemented that. That included giving a fair amount of autonomy to the Donbass region. And the thing was signed. A few days later, Angela Merkel comes on an interview and says, we have no intention of accepting the terms of implementing Minsk II accord. How do you think Putin is going to feel? See, these are all little things. I know you probably say, well, now you're suddenly a Russia supporter. No, I'm just saying these are all some of the ground facts here. Not only that, I think Bojo goes to a Norway newspaper and claims that the MI6 units are embedded with the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
So
yes. Yeah. No, I completely agree.
These are your guys. You are saying all these things. Not only that, third thing, this is the biggest one. 64 kilometers column of trucks was military trucks were stationed just outside Kiev. And 1 month after the conflict started, Ukraine was about to sign the deal, and in a goodwill gesture, Putin pulled out all those trucks. They all went back to Belarus or Belarus.
Yeah.
Belarus. And what happens? Bojo comes in and prevents Zelenskyy from signing that agreement, and suddenly Russia looks like the fool. I'm just telling you guys, these are all things that actually happened in the last few years. And whether Russia is going to continue, I have a feeling even today, whatever land that they are getting back or they are getting from Russia, from Ukraine, I'm sorry, these are all majority Russian-speaking areas, as far as my knowledge goes, including Odessa, I believe. There has been a fair amount of ethnic cleansing that is alleged in Odessa of Russian-speaking people. That also has happened over the past few years. That's what I'm hearing. Also, the biggest kicker, in my opinion, you can tell me, Utsav, this is true or not. After coming to power, Zelenskyy banned usage of Russian language as an official language in Ukraine. Is this true?
That's correct. There have been re-education camps in schools. The students get punished if they don't speak Ukrainian. And students usually, the irony of the situation is that in class they are forced to speak Ukrainian, and sometimes when they go out in the recess or they play out in the park, they start speaking to each other in Russian. And then they but see, some of it is also Russian propaganda. We have to understand that Russia will give its version out as part of its propaganda. But if you were to look at this conflict neutrally, and what I am saying here has been said by even Vice President Vance in many of his communications before he became Vice President. There is a reason to believe that Russia feels genuinely aggrieved by a series of events that unfolded over the last 15-20 years, starting with NATO's promise of not expanding eastwards. And so at this point, the way, if you see the way Russia presents itself in communications and conversations, it's literally saying that we do not trust you guys. You have to do something to make us trust you before we do anything from our end. And I think that is this lack of trust has caused so much bloodshed in this part of the conflict, because now both sides obviously don't trust each other, and Russia is saying, we have had enough. We are willing to pay with blood the price of ensuring a safety for ourselves, and that's not a good place to be.
Thank you so much. And Bangladesh still boiling. We may have an update tomorrow. See, all these things point, if something happens, it could very well happen tomorrow, viewers. Why I say that is it is expected that NDA is coming back with a good majority in Bihar, this is what the exit polls are saying. Again, exit polls all seem to come from one source. If that one source gets it wrong, the whole thing will go for a toss. So don't kill me if this thing happens the other way.
But those are not trustworthy.
just so these are all things that are happening nowadays, where there is some action, everybody's looking in this direction, the real action happens somewhere else. So thank you so much, Utsav. We've taken 40 minutes. I can't believe it. I mean, this thing went so fast. Viewers, your support is vital, and this is really late at night in India. Wherever you are watching from, thank you so much for joining us. I know the notifications did not go out for this one, yet we see a very good crowd. You are a star, Utsav. You are a great crowd puller. Thank you so much, and we'll be revisiting this in a couple of weeks' time as things unfold in Ukraine. Thanks once again. Namaskar.
Namaste, everybody.